All right, since we are about 2 minutes past the hour, I know we still have folks joining, but we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Cadence True. I'm a technology collaboration manager for OHSU Innovates, and I just want to thank everyone for joining us today in the second seminar in the OHSU Innovates Speaker Series. This seminar is titled Promoting Inventor Equity and Patenting. This quarterly speaker series aims to engage the entrepreneurial community with inspiring stories and successes and lessons learned to hopefully break down and catalyze a more equitable and innovative future. Next slide, please. So today's programming is brought to you by OHSU Innovates, which is a collective network of departments working together with OHSU members and external partners to advance innovation and entrepreneurship. Innovates provides services and programs in the areas shown here on the screen, and we urge those interested in learning more to connect with us through our website or email. Next slide. For those interested in additional Innovates programming, we encourage you to attend OHSU Innovation Day on May 9th. The day will feature a keynote and several panels on topics of innovation and entrepreneurship. And we will provide a link to registration in the chat for those interested. Next slide. We'd also like to give a quick acknowledgement of the OHSU Innovate sponsors that help make programming like today's possible. These include GE Healthcare, Lee & Hayes, Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt, Stern Kessler, Kilpatrick Townsend, Clark Wist, and Stoll Reeves. Next slide. Finally, before I hand things over to today's moderator, just a few housekeeping items. Please enter any questions into the Q&A box. They will be queued, and time permitting, we'll shoot a few of these out to our panel at the end of today's session. And as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded, so we ask that you please turn off your video and remain unmuted. And that is the end of my slides. So with that, I would like to hand the stage over to today's moderator, Stephen Sullivan, to get us going.
Okay, thank you so much, Cadence. I'm very excited to be here today. My name is Stephen Sullivan, and I've held positions as a software engineer, a patent attorney, both in-house and in law firms, and a co-founder of a Silicon Valley startup. Currently, I'm a shareholder and technology industry leader for Schwabe, Williamson, and Wyatt, where I focus on high technology patent prosecution. I'm also an inventor on 5 named patents, which is why I'm so interested in today's topic. So now I'll ask the panelists, Anne, Ruchi, and Carmen, to introduce themselves.
Hi, good morning. I'm Ruchi Thanawala. Thank you for the opportunity to be part of this wonderful panel and on this really important topic. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Surgery. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. I'm a named inventor on a patent and other patents that are, in process. I'm also co-founder of a medical education company and a nonprofit focused on improving education. So thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Carmem Pfeifer. I'm professor and division head of biomaterials and biomedical sciences at the School of Dentistry, OHSU. I have been in OHSU for 12 years as faculty. I'm the named inventor in 4 different patents, and very thankful for this opportunity to be here to discuss this important topic, as was said, and also for the support that the TBD has provided me and my lab and all my research team over the years. So thank you again for joining.
Hi, and I'm Ann Carlson. I'm the Associate Director of Technology Development and Licensing at OHSU. I oversee the Technology Development and Licensing team, and we help our OHSU members identify inventions in their work with them to find appropriate ways to protect those inventions, and that includes patenting, and then hopefully license those technologies out to existing companies or help form startup companies who are licensing those techs. I'm a trained scientist, worked in the bench for many, many years, PhD, postdoc, but then switched to patent law, was a registered patent agent working at a law firm here in town for almost 13 years before coming to OHSU and working here in the tech transfer office. So very excited to be on this panel and talking about this important discussion or topic. Thanks, Stephen and everyone.
Okay, thanks so much. All right, so as 2019, women and people of color made up a very small percentage of inventors on patents issued in the US at approximately 12% and 1% respectively. These disparities in patent inventorship surpass even those in the scientific authorship and bring with them significant economic implications. Before we start this discussion, I'll give an overview of the patent process just for the people in the audience who may not be that familiar with the patent process. And this is important for the context for the rest of the talk. So in an organization, the patent process typically begins with an inventor of a group of inventors filling out a form called an invention disclosure form. And that's a form where the inventors kind of give an overview of the invention and the advantages the invention has over existing solutions that we call prior art. And then a committee within the organization reviews and prioritizes all the invention disclosure forms they receive, and then they send them out to a patent attorney to prepare the patent application. The patent application describes the details of the invention, how it works, how it's used, how it's made, and the application ends with a set of claims defining the legal boundaries of the invention, similar to a deed in the legal context. I'm sorry, in the real estate context. Once the patent attorney drafts the patent application, the inventors review it. And once they approve, the inventors assign their rights to the invention to the organization who will become the owner of the patent. The attorney then files the applications with the USPTO, and the USPTO assigns the invention to a group art unit that specializes in the field of the invention. An examiner then assesses whether the invention is novel and non-obvious over existing solutions described in publications like other patents. If not, the examiner issues an office action rejecting the claims. The attorney responds with arguments and claim amendments to overcome the rejections. And there may be several rounds of this back and forth correspondence, which is referred to as prosecution of the patent. Once the examiner agrees the invention recited in the claims is patentable, the examiner issues a notice of allowance, and the patent grants after payment of an issue fee. Now, this process could take between 1 to 3 years, and once granted, the patent gives the owner the right to exclude others from making, using, or selling the invention for 20 years from the date of filing. Now, in this whole process, the term inventorship refers to the individuals who conceived of the ideas that led to the creation of the patentable invention. And then an inventor is legally defined when they have contributed to the conception of at least one claim in the patent. Authorship, on the other hand, refers to individuals who wrote or contributed to writing a particular work, such as a scientific paper, a book, or an article. So I want to ask the panelists how this definition of inventorship is similar or different from your perspective from authorship, and how do you approach them differently?
I think I can tackle that one, or at least get us started, get the ball rolling on this. I think you explained it clearly that the main difference between authorship and inventorship is where the contribution lies, right? So if you start with the conceptualization and you're trying to figure out what the project is, that's an inventor. Every contribution that goes after that is supposed to be an author. That being said, I've taken the approach too of people who have made significant contributions, even if they're not the entire claim, but they made some contribution that made that claim possible. That, I know this is a gray area, and maybe I'll punt the ball back to you guys on to how to comment or to comment on that. But this is the approach I've been taking, especially as it relates to inequity, which we'll go into later. But Ruchi, does that differ from what you have done in the past?
No, I think that's very much in line. I think the very early phases, like the conceptual phases, are easier to say that this is, the key role of the inventor, or, the individual contributed to the inventorship role in developing the claim. It is the other stuff where it goes into the experimentation phase of proving the impact and novelness of that invention, where I think the line gets a little blurry. And I think there is an early part of that which sits kind of perhaps on both sides and gets a little harder to sort out. But I do think there's a bit of a continuum. And then there is the clearer part, which is sits, you know, in the authorship role, which is doing derivative research after the invention has been established. And now, you know, in the scientific arena, we're developing the understanding of its application and use and, you know, benefits to society.
All right. In an article called Improving Equity in Patent Inventorship by Professor Chen and Wyatt, the article reported that a study of scientific research teams found that compared to men, women are 13% less likely to be named as authors on articles and 58% less likely to be named on patents. So with that, what are ways you have seen inequity in the patents perpetuated? Or do you have examples of cases where equity was promoted successfully?
I can start with that. I think it goes down to kind of this common theme is knowledge that you've played an inventor role in developing an invention. And I think that, you know, if we look at the numbers around women who are leaders within healthcare environments, women who are leaders within, you know, startup companies and larger companies, it is the opportunity to get to that place and position, and then also recognition that you have contributed in that way. And I think this is probably where women have met a lot of challenges, is the opportunity to get to that role and then getting the credit for that role. I think things that we are doing well is I see a lot more mentorship, which I think is one of the key themes in how we can combat inequity within patenting, is having more mentors to let women and other individuals that are underrepresented in successful patenting recognize that they are playing in an inventor role and they're not an author or, you know, otherwise. So at least, you know, that's been my experience and my thoughts.
And I think what I could add to that is the concept of the leaky pipeline, right? That influences everything that we do. Women are less likely to be PIs on grants and so on and so forth. So if you think about the environment in your university, most of the research is financed by federal grants and federal funds. And then if you are a PI on a grant, you are more likely to have control of how the inventions and how everything else, papers and everything else is dealt with. That being said, what I wanted to say too is that I think we've made lots of strides in the past few years. We talked about this in our preparations, that we didn't want this panel to be the gloom and doom. We're all doomed and there's no way outside of this. And what Ruchi just mentioned is mentorship is crucial. And that concept also as of lift as you rise, you need allies and you need people who are willing to bring people forward as they go up, is what I would say. So in summary, what I think is the issue is it starts even before you can think of a concept, right? It's how are you a PI on a grant? Are you connected to actually have contacts with the industry, like in Ruchi's case, to develop a product that's clinically relevant?
Yeah, and I think I'll also add that I think mentorship is so important because I find that maybe people, it's very intimidating, right? The whole patent process, just like I think a lot of people feel like they're intimidated by science to begin with, so they don't even move into science. So similarly with patenting, it's a whole other language. There's this mystique around patenting that only certain people can be involved with it because it's very technical. You have to have certain training in order to, well, anybody can file a patent application, but maybe to be the most successful at it, you have to hire an attorney. And so there's some intimidation around that. And I think, you know, having some mentorship to help get over some of those challenges would be really an advance forward. So I agree. The mentorship that Ruchi mentioned, I think, is super important in making progress that way, making it available to everyone.
Mentorship is very important, and we're going to discuss that a little bit further along in this presentation. But as a follow-up to this question, I was wondering, you know, how does inequity in inventorship compare with inequity in authorship in your experience? Carmen, maybe you want to begin with that one?
I think it might be worse in patents or inventorship, because for you to be able to be included in the conceptualization stage, you need to be able to speak up and make sure that your ideas are being heard. And I know we're going to talk about mentorship later on, right? But that's the underpinning of everything that we're talking about now. How, especially if it's a trainee, right? Especially if it's a student or a postdoc, or there's a power imbalance with whoever else is in the room. If you are from an underrepresented group, you're less likely, I think, to speak up. And even when you do, you probably have seen this in your lives, this example. Even when you do, sometimes your ideas are only heard when somebody else in the room paraphrases it, right? So I think for inventorship, especially because there's a potential financial stake into all of this, I would say that it's the causes are the root causes between the inequity and inventorship and authorship are the same, but I think the intensity of them changes, and it's a little bit more intense in inventorship.
I'll just add to that. I agree 100%. I think the inequity is far worse in inventorship than in authorship. And I relate it to, like, you know, the entrepreneurial world. The number of women CEOs compared to the number of women managers, the CEOs, you know, these thought leaders, the PIs, these are the ones who are at the table coming up with the ideas. They're the conceptualizers. Far more women tend to be executors of existing plans, even if they had been part of the conceptual development of the plan, because of kind of these roles that have been established that we're trying to break through. And I think that parallels the inventorship versus authorship, because a lot of authorship is, you know, carrying forward existing ideas and testing them in the real world. I think going back to the mentorship, and I know we're going to talk about this, there's a lot less focus on educating. Like if we think of all of our scientific training, we are trained in the process of scientific experiment and authorship. Very few of us are actually knowledgeable and trained within recognizing inventorship and the process of inventorship. So I think by default, we also gravitate towards that, in addition to, you know, the barriers that exist to many women and others getting credit for inventorship roles.
Just one thing to add to this, Ruchi, that you guys should have been in the pre-discussion that we had before this panel. Just adding to this, Ruchi, I think innovation is the other thing that we're not offered training in innovation in general, right? It's not just when you get to the point of getting to the patent. It's even think about what research in a different way on feasibility. So as you go along in this process and you start interfacing with industry and what kinds of products are actually economically viable, which, let's face it, if you're a researcher, like a pure PhD doing basic research in your lab, you're not thinking about this necessarily, right? You're not trained to think about it this necessarily. And then you go through the whole process and you have a patent of a product you think is great. When you interact with industry, they say, well, have you thought about X, Y, and Z? That's crucial for the clinical world. So two things: training and innovation, and also early engagement with the end user. It sounds obvious, right? But I don't think it's a common practice in graduate training, for example.
I'd like to follow on to that, because I think this is a topic that probably a lot of us are very passionate about, is the extension of patenting and inventorship into innovation. And this is where a lot of my work outside of, you know, surgery has been in, is because if we think about the barriers, and when we had our, you know, pre-discussions and stuff, is say you get an office action back and it's a rejection. I think if you know you have like made the connection between your invention and innovation, how it's going to exist in the outside world, your willingness to get through all of that, to get to a successful allowance on your patent, is far higher. So I think successful invention, increasing the equity within invention, has to be tied to the innovation, because we have to let our inventors know, why does this matter? Because, you know, we go through all this process, we protect our ideas because there's going to be some sort of economic advantage to the individual. And if we don't actually build in education on what the advantages are, how to leverage all the time, energy, and effort in inventing and going through the patenting process, we're missing out on the tail end, which is really how we're going to improve equity across the board. So we think about the number of individuals that could successfully patent and take these ideas to market, we need to increase the number of individuals who successfully reach their market and impact.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And following up on your comment about equity and how that has a bigger impact, I think, everybody brings a different perspective to innovation, right? And their own personal experience, what they see a need in the market or in healthcare, or so that's very important in order to have a more diverse and equitable approach to innovation. But also getting back to Carmen's point about, there's an inherent challenge in an academic setting. Most research is being done based on government grants, which is most of those grants are focused on discovery, right? Understanding biology. So sometimes that doesn't necessarily lead to an invention. Most of the time it doesn't lead. It leads to understanding how biology works. And it does take another different kind of mindset to sort of ask different questions. So, or do the next step. So you identify a target, a biological target that helps, or understand the mechanism of how a tumor functions. But what is going to be the innovation that's going to lead to a new drug? It's going to be finding a new chemical compound that will target or hit that target. So it's taking the next step, is trying to identify what you could do to turn that discovery into something that is a commercial product. And that's the challenge, I think, really, too, is taking it to the next step. So leveraging everything that we discovered, all those amazing discoveries at OHSU and other academic centers to find the solutions to the healthcare problems that we have to answer.
One quick follow-up, sorry, Steve, one quick follow-up on that is that diversity can also be defined in terms of your backgrounds, right? And what you're talking about is drug development or device development, whatever it is. You're far more likely to be successful if you have engineers working with a clinician, working with a basic scientist, and so on and so forth. So diversity in a broader term is the point that I'm trying to make here.
Yeah. Yeah, approaching problems as a team with different expertise and not necessarily working in silos is important as well. And we see that at OHSU more and more, team approaches to answering problems, finding solutions to problems.
Speaking of the team approach, when there is a large team, one explanation for the cause of inequitable inventorship attribution is bias. Another is that underrepresented innovators are less likely to play the conceptualizer role, such as setting the research team's direction rather than implementation, the experimenter, go run this experiment. So therefore, the experimenter type people are less likely to be permitted to add their names to invention disclosures or resulting patents. What are your impressions of those two explanations?
Okay, I'll get a start. I think different people have different talents, right? So that's the other. I'm not even talking about the underrepresented portion of this. And there's this argument, devil's advocate argument, to say, well, should everybody be an inventor? Don't we need the people to be the implementers, right? Some people are really good at thinking big pictures. Others are very focused on how to actually get this into operation. So that doesn't necessarily, I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think the bad thing is when certain groups are boxed into each of those roles based on their gender, race, ethnicity, and what have you. So I think that distinction is important to make, that people have different talents, but you can't simply box or bias people into those roles, I think is what you were saying.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's someone making a decision for someone else that I think is the challenge. To have someone conclude you should only have this role, or I'm only going to give you credit for this role without that person, consenting to that. And I think this is perhaps where the challenge is say if you have a PI, whoever led or is part of the conceptual decision-making, and they're determining the inventor list, excluding individuals who may have a different perception of it, and how do we actually resolve those sorts of conflicts in perception of contribution?
That's the mentorship part, right? That's the mentorship part. When you say that people who wouldn't necessarily have a lower likelihood or less likelihood of saying something, you have to. It's not easy. I'm not saying by any means it's not easy, and not everybody's supposed to be a mentor either. That's another topic. But how do you mentor people so they grow in confidence to actually speak up and gently, like, politely, but speak up and advocate for themselves?
And I think the other issue, and I haven't been in the lab in a very long time, but I think the other issue is allowing them into the conversation, right? If, just because somebody has a specific role, doesn't mean they shouldn't be part of the larger discussion, the scientific discussion. But again, it obviously depends on the structure of the lab and what their role is. But everyone should have an opportunity to be part of that creative process.
I have a follow-on question. In this team approach in the lab, if, say, you're the person who's stuck in this box as being an implementer, and someone creates an invention disclosure and you're left out of it, you find out after the fact, how is one supposed to speak up for themselves when you don't even know that you've been left off in the first place?
Run to the hills, change labs is what I would say. I'm kidding. This I know this is terrible. Yeah, that's a problem. When you find out after the fact, it's a big problem. I don't have a good answer to that. It's what's done is done.
Well, I'd like to think that that they hopefully they are aware of the tech transfer office and aware of the resources that exist at the university, whichever university they're at, and then could and that the visibility of the tech transfer office allows them to just reach out and ask basic questions like that. So, I mean, again, we don't know always. We don't know who was left off inadvertently or intentionally. Hopefully not, but we always encourage people to come and talk to us and ask us any questions they have about innovation, inventorship, patenting. So that's one avenue that maybe they could take. And
I just thought of maybe a suggestion for our IDF form here at OHSU, if you may indulge me. Maybe what we should do is include on that form every single person who touched the project in any capacity. And then somebody other than the PI makes a determination on whether that person should or should not be an inventor, because that would prevent this problem like you were saying. Well, the PI made a decision that person is not an inventor, but TTBD never gets the information of what the roles of potentially other individuals are. So I'm just putting more work on your plate, but maybe that's one way to do it.
Yeah, we're in the process of updating our form, so probably good timing with that suggestion. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult. We always want to make sure we're including the right people and everyone, and part of that should come out in the discussion. It's not set in stone what is on the disclosure form. There oftentimes there are people who aren't necessarily considered inventors who are included. But part of that discussion in terms of understanding the invention, having the discussion with the folks who are listed on the disclosure form, asking, and the other appropriate question would be at that time, is anybody else, involved in this project who maybe contributed something? And also evaluating, who is really an inventor, or what was their contribution. And it's possible sometimes they shouldn't be included on the patent, even though they're on the form.
I think that's a fantastic idea. It's, it's almost like a innovation feedback system. If you were to make that implementation where anyone who touched the invention is listed on the invention disclosure form, the review committee reviews that, someone makes a determination of who's the inventor, it goes back to the group. You're notified, everyone's notified, and it's kind of self-healing in a way. So that's a fantastic opportunity to reduce bias, potential bias. Ruchi, did you have anything else to add?
Yeah, another thought was just, so, like in clinical practice, we have these best practices or these, guidelines or, is a best practice for like, if you're in a lab, you're the PI of a lab and every person that's in, participating in research in the lab to have kind of this open best practices sort of discussion, like a document, like this is how we do this. So there's a lot of transparency from the outset, because I think a lot of times we're sorting these things out retroactively, like the scenario, Stephen, that you put forth. A lot of that's said and done. The goal is to make this better the next time, which is, I think, increasing the transparency from the beginning, just like Carmen, and when we write papers, like if you have a large group, we determine authorship fairly early on, especially if there are going to be multiple papers that come through. I think that's a conversation we're used to having with, collaborators and thing of, who's going to be final author, where does everyone sit? Similar to this, where if there was a best practices sort of process that allowed for a lot of transparency and guidance, that perhaps we could avoid this, someone being left off of the inventor list, in the future.
Okay. Speaking of best practices, there have been several ideas floated around about how companies and universities can promote equity, as well as ways the USPTO can address this challenge. So with respect to companies and universities, there's been several strategies, including mentorship that we already mentioned, changing the language surrounding the invention disclosure process from using language that focuses on the solution rather than the word invention, which has all this context related with it. And then the third way is finding new and different ways to highlight underrepresented inventors, such as LinkedIn campaigns or other communication channels. What do you think of these suggested strategies?
I can start. I think they are great. I think we need a multi-pronged approach that not only sits in the responsibility of the universities and the companies, but takes it down to the individual level, which is, I think, kind of going backwards, the LinkedIn campaigns and individuals promoting individuals is very important. I think also we have a lot of trust when we go, laterally across, people that we respect, that we work with on a regular basis. So I think it is important that we highlight individual successes and really, bring those to the forefront so others can recognize the good work that's being done. The way I think that continues to trickle upwards is, active campaigns, at a university level, not only just like mentorship, but real education that's available to everyone and made knowledgeable to everyone at all levels, that, we have training in, the invention and patenting process, in innovation. I think there has to be a really broad methodology to, capture and to improve in the equity.
Yeah, and I can add to that, especially in universities, this is kind of a culture change in some units. So for you to be, it goes back to faculty development, professional development at all levels, right? OHSU has these amazing resources that have, it's very hard to curate. So unless you are very driven and super organized and go look for them, you can't find them. And TTBD, and I'm sorry I keep referring to you as TTBD. That's how I've known you for 12 years.
You're not the only one.
You guys have lots of resources and you promote a lot of different things that, that come through emails, and I pay attention to all of them. But, if this doesn't come, maybe think about unit level, from the dean's office level or the associate dean for research level, that people are actually encouraged to take part on these things. I think that it can fall flat, and even though the resources are there, they're underutilized. So I sometimes I have the cynical view of saying, we don't need more resources. I think we have lots of resources already. It's just that how do we make sure that we take full advantage of the things that are already in place?
Right, and we do have a lot of resources, and thank you for pointing that out, Carmem, on our website. And like I said, we're always available to chat with folks. I mean, granted, there's a lot of sort of repeat inventors, right? So, and that's maybe the bias that that exists, is that we communicate with the same few people over and over, and the challenge is reaching out and being able to work with those who don't on their own reach out to us, and finding them, and making sure that we have relationships with as many members at OHSU as possible. Yeah, so but we have a number of programming and a number of opportunities that we can that are available to the university.
What does everyone think about the notion of changing the language to focus on, hey, do you have a new solution, or how did you fix this, as opposed to saying, do you have a new invention? Would that really spur people to file more invention disclosure?
I personally think it would, because I think there is an intimidation factor that sits around the word invention. And I think groups that have traditionally not been successful perhaps are unlikely to say that, the second time that they do have an invention, whereas if we frame it around a solution, that seems like a much more accessible term. I mean, it's used a lot more colloquially. And I think also inverting the process to ask people, like, what did you do related to this new thing? We may determine, find inventions that way, instead of someone saying, yes, I invented something, which I think is much harder to put words around with confidence.
Or maybe thinking about this also from the problem-based approach, right? So you're talking about a solution. What are the pain points you're addressing with this? Were you able to address a pain point? There you go. Potentially you have an invention. I think especially for clinicians, it would be a lot easier to understand it that way, because these people are very creative. They're thinking and tackling problems on a daily basis, right? But again, it goes back to the culture. And do you have that hovering over your head that you could be applying for something like this?
Well, I think that mention of authors is so important, because in the software arts, software engineers hardly ever think anything is patentable. So if you ask them, did you invent something? They say no. But if you ask them, how did you solve this problem? They'll go on for days. That's just how you phrase the question.
And that brings you closer to commercialization, right? I mean, that brings you, if you're trying to solve a problem, you're recognizing that there's a need somewhere. And we need to, as Carmen alluded to earlier, there's two issues that we're trying to address, at least at the university tech transfer level. One is something patentable? And two, is it commercializable? I mean, we have limited, limited funds to file patent applications. And so we have to make decisions about what makes sense. What is going to, there are lots of things that are patentable. Not everything is a commercial product or can be turned into a commercial product. So we have to be smart about what we're filing on. And we are very fortunate at OHSU. We have an in-house patent team who is actually an incredible resource, because unlike using outside counsel, I'm sorry, Stephen, but unlike where we have to pay for their services, right? I mean, our in-house patent counsel is available to everyone at the university for any question they have. So we don't, it's a resource that is highly valuable. And not only do they file some of our patent applications for us, but they are available as a sounding board. Part of the educational resources are through them, right? Because we get a disclosure, or even prior to the disclosure, a researcher comes to us and says, I think I have an invention. I'm not really sure. Should I disclose? And I said, well, let's meet with, our patent team and let's have a discussion. What else do you need to do in order for it to be ready to file a patent application? Who might be inventors? That kind of thing. And we don't have to worry about the dollar amount, because, we do work with outside counsel, obviously, too, because they don't have the bandwidth to file on everything or the expertise to file on everything. But that is an incredible resource that we have at OHSU. And most universities don't have that resource.
And I just want to emphasize the importance of that, and the fact that having people that are willing to listen and, you know, recognize that they maybe don't have the expertise to recognize that this is a patentable invention. And I know your office has done has made a lot of progress in that arena, in, you know, actually connecting inventors, potential inventors, with people who would say, oh yeah, that's something not in my field, but then let's go to outside counsel and figure this out. And I think that's amazing. That's an amazing resource. Just wanted to reiterate that.
I think something to add is when we think about the clinical arena, such a different world than when it comes to entrepreneurship. I think at a baseline, clinicians, we are doing this for, you know, various reasons. A lot of it's, you know, benefit society, benevolence, that we're not in that frame of mind. And I think a couple of clinicians, you know, that have talked to me about it, they feel like they have to have everything perfectly packaged before they even come to check transfer. Like they have to have it all figured out. And I think that intimidation factor actually probably limits some of the conversations, and demystifying the fact that you can have an early conversation, you know, your team can help figure it out together, would be really important to capturing a lot of these clinicians who feel like, how could I, you know, independent of, you know, who the individual is. I think there is this kind of cognitive barrier of like, there's no way I could be an inventor. You know, I do this, I take care of patients. And, you know, opening that door and having a broader conversation, I think would automatically lead to more individuals who are recognized as inventors.
That was a great conversation about how companies and universities can promote more equity. Now turning to the USPTO, there's suggested ways that they can help too. 3 ideas. One is collecting more bibliographic data, which is kind of done when you do research papers. Opening more USPTO satellites, particularly in underrepresented communities, and providing extra guidance to pro se applicants, which are patent applicants who lack legal representation, basically filing without an attorney. What do you think about these suggested strategies?
Can they afford to do all of that? That sounds amazing.
Are you referring to the pro se applicants? Yeah, the PTO has lowered fees for small entities, micro entities, and presumably under this program, probably even lower fees for pro se applicants, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, actually, it was interesting. I mean, I worked in the patent field for a long time, and I'm still kind of peripherally associated with it in my current role. But you know, I was surprised I didn't realize there's a pro bono program at the PTO, which is really interesting, because I think there's the big hurdle is the cost. In addition to the intimidation and not understanding, you know, how to draft a patent application effectively. You know, typically anyone can file a patent application who's an inventor, but to be successful, it takes skill and knowledge of the law, because there's always updates in patent law and case law, and that can affect how the patent examiners review and evaluate your patent claims. So having a pro bono type system sort of definitely opens it up to others who may normally not be able to afford that, you know, that opportunity to file a patent application and prosecute it to success, to an issued patent. But also, yeah, so I think the financial hurdle is significant, and if we can find ways to get around that, that'd be helpful.
I think the idea of offering guidance also, you know, making direct guidance more accessible would also be beneficial to the individuals that are doing it without, you know, legal representation. Because we live in the university environment where we have, you know, and this entire team to help guide us. Even more intimidating for individuals who are completely inventing on their own outside of the structure of a company or a university. So there needs to be some available resource for them. And, you know, no one better than the USPTO if they have the resources and, you know, finances to do it.
Especially, sorry, if the PTO website is easily navigable, that's the right word. If you can navigate through the PTO website and find those resources, that would be helpful. not sure how easy it is to find those resources unless you know what you're looking for. So.
Yeah, having worked in this field, for a very long time, there's a lot of hurdles to getting an issued patent, cost, knowledge of the law, knowledge of the process. And another one I see is even if there's extra guidance to pro se applicants and pro bono services, and that results in an issued patent, there's a potential drawback on the back end of that, which is the whole IPR process. So for people who don't know, validly issued patents can be challenged when they're asserted in a process called an inter partes review, where the accused infringer asks the PTO to reevaluate this issued patent to see if it really is patentable. And unfortunately, the rate of those invalidations in the IPR process are about 50 to 80%, depending on who you ask, of instituted claims are found unpatentable. So one potential drawback to having pro se applicants is, even if they pass these hurdles of getting issued patents, and then a third hurdle of actually asserting their patent against someone in a patent infringement action, that accused person is going to institute an IPR, and that patent is ultimately probably has a high probability of being invalidated. So do we really want to incentivize people to go through this huge amount of time and effort only to have their patent invalidated? And also, what happens to all the fees they paid? Typically, in an IPR, all the fees one paid to get a patent are not refunded. So you lose all that money. So that's kind of one drawback I see in terms of pro se applicants. But what about collecting more bibliographic data? Do you see that as a help or a hindrance?
What do you mean? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think the idea there is, I think in the paper by Professor Chen, she highlighted how on authorship research papers there is bibliographic data that is collected, and therefore you can track the rates of filing by women and underrepresented people better. The patent office traditionally doesn't do that. So by tracking this information, we can address this challenge more easily. I don't think it would ever be used in the examination process because it's not relevant.
I have one maybe aside to say on this. I'm part of this panel to decide resources for trainees and underrepresented minorities on NIH side, for example. And it's amazing that the same problems we're discussing here apply to that situation too. The website is awful to navigate. The resources are there, but nobody can find them. And there's no data collection on who does what, and so it's very hard to propose solutions if you don't have the correct data, right, to address potential inequities. So long-winded way to say, I think it would be great if we could do better tracking and have better data on the bibliographic information, like what you're saying.
I agree. I think I'm also an informaticist. So from the informaticist data science, the more information we get, the better. And when I was actually preparing for this panel, I learned, and correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen, like the USPTO doesn't gather demographic data either on the inventors.
Well, they know what county you're from.
Okay.
Yeah.
But nothing on gender or race or ethnicity or anything. That I think, the bibliographic data is one data set of the many valuable data sets around inventors that we should probably be capturing to more carefully quantify where the inequity is, and then, put in interventions like the bibliographic assessment, doing more outreach. So the USPTO can actually measure what the effect is and the benefit, when we're trying to direct limited resources, how to most, carefully direct those. So I think there's a lot of tremendous value in that data.
Couldn't AI basically be used to get this information retroactively from the things that are already published? So rather than, there's got to be a way of writing code to look at patents that already exist. I mean, I couldn't. My life depended on it, but I'm sure smarter people than me could.
Yeah.
Well, perhaps. Okay, well, moving on. Let me see. So what are some other programs, resources that organizations can implement to better support and encourage underrepresented inventors? to patent their innovations. I know that, for example, Microsoft has a really nice program, and it has 3 initiatives. One is strategic partnership with employee resource groups. Another is targeted patent training for women's affinity groups, and networking and patent discussion in small groups. Do you have any comments on those, or is there any other things that we could think about to help this problem?
I think, within the OHSU, the university environment, sessions like this, one-on-one pairings, to establish relationships between individuals, like people who are, early in their scientific, inventorship journey, outreach into the community. We talk about, like, we have STEM outreach for high school students and even younger, but to include discussion and understanding on what it is, to invent, what it is to develop your own, technologies and things like that. I think these sorts of empowering conversations can go far beyond even the level of just companies and adults. I think we need to reach further and deeper into our communities to really empower these individuals. We regularly will see on this news the superstar kid who's invented something. I mean, there's so many more kids out there and adults and, people who are in college and, onwards that we can be capturing. And I think that will be the global culture change we need around this. So equity is driven by individuals in addition to companies and universities.
Outstanding. I think that's a really great comment, and a good way to conclude the presentation. So I think we have a few questions in the audience, so let's go ahead and turn to the questions.
Yeah, great. And just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the Q&A box. So we have one kind of a 2-part. Does the USPTO set any limit on how many inventors may be identified on a patent? And then the second part is, are there any form templates or sort of worksheets for defining shared responsibilities and credit, who should get credit before a team goes into the patent application process that any of you are aware of?
I don't know.
Stephen, you might be best for this question.
You might, yeah, that's for you, Steve.
Yeah, the form one, that one would be individual organization, and I've never worked with an organization that collects that kind of information. The USPTO does not have a limit, because there's so many different fields of invention. I think it would be impractical to do that, but it is necessary that each, you don't want to list 28 inventors, or a really huge amount of inventors, because it gets increasingly more difficult to prove that each one invented to the conception of at least one claim in the patent. So for that reason, you don't really see that many people. You might get up to 10, 12 on certain inventions, but usually the numbers around 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, and I'll add that depending on the technology and the invention, it's harder to imagine that there would be, 10 or more people involved. So for example, if you're an inventor if somebody invented a chemical compound, how many people really actually conceived of that chemical structure? And the fear is, if you have too many people, you don't want there to be an opportunity for somebody to invalidate the patent. So you have to be, there is a concern there where you have to make sure that there's justification for including the people as inventors on the patent. And, as far as the form goes, our disclosure form does ask, what your contribution is, and that's an opportunity to have that discussion. So again, the form is not set in stone. It can change. We can ask you to update the description of the technology. We can ask you to change the people on the form, or adjust depending on what our discussions determine. Who the correct list of inventors are, or contributors. So that's, I guess, the closest, I think, example of what a form template could be for, prior to really getting into the patent process. It's really the entree into that. I
have maybe one comment on the flip side of that. So like, if you have fewer authors than the radar limit. So like they're flying under the radar. It's been my experience on those 4 patents that were issued that nobody even asked me to prove that these people are really conceptualizers. So I think that there's 2 sides of the same coin, maybe. If you're trying to overdo in authors, yeah, that's going to raise a red flag. But on the other hand, if you're flying under the radar and you don't get asked, doesn't mean that you're being accurate either.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a good point.
We had another question from the chat stating it's an excellent discussion about available resources. Accessibility is important. What role do academic institutions and companies play in supporting accessibility for underrepresented groups and women in patenting their inventions?
I think information needs to get out there. And I think I made this comment before, that this is a culture change that has to come up. And hi, Wyatt, this is my Associate Dean for Research. So people like the Associate Dean for Research, could have initiatives to actually change the culture. So even in our case, in the School of Dentistry, dental students start to get involved in research. I know that this is something our school is very passionate about. Hopefully we'll be able to start some initiatives on that realm. But yeah, I think the role of academic institutions is make the information available and ensure that it gets to the right parties. Somebody else also said, and I apologize, I forget who that was, in terms of the mentorship, doing the buddy system, pairing somebody who is already an inventor with somebody who could be with the potential inventor is also a way of doing that.
Yeah, excellent idea. Yeah.
And I think one thing to add to that is when, the institutions and, we're putting these initiatives together. If the institution, we recognize that the same individuals are showing up and we don't have, these people that, we're not having diversity within the crowd, we need to do something differently to actually actively engage the individuals that are not showing up, that we know that are likely, doing inventorship work. Because I think sometimes we see the same groups there, just like we have, repeat inventors. There are other people there, and the strength and the value and the impact is in the negative space, the people that are not.
Great. Well, thank you all. I think we've only got 1 more minute left, so I will probably leave it there. But thank you all so much for participating today. I think it was an excellent discussion. As we mentioned, hopefully a little bit motivating and inspiring of, things that we can do in the future. Thank you all for your time and thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.